Program supervisor for Sarazen. Sarazen is a domestic violence agency that got its start in the Oak Park area. So it has deep roots in the Oak Park River Forest communities. But we've since moved physical locations to Forest Park. And I think of that as more of a positive and a negative. A positive in the sense that our organization is evolving to take on more needs of our clients, and so we needed more space, taking in more clients. But also the fact that we have more clients is a negative, right? That shouldn't be happening. We shouldn't have more cases of domestic violence, right? So in my work, I'm usually in the schools, middle schools or high schools, and so I'll ask the question. I'll ask students, "Have you ever heard of Sarazen before?" And most of them say no, and I'm like, "That's a good thing. Take that as a blessing. You've never heard of us. Hopefully you never need us." But then I go on and give them the spiel about what we do. So our organization started as a community initiative. One neighbor gave their phone number to another that was in need, and that's evolved into a full-fledged social service agency that we have today, which is pretty cool. So we have a few different departments, but as you can imagine, the bulk of the work is working directly with folks that have been impacted by or experienced domestic violence directly. So we have the larger departments that serves our agency are our counselors and our advocates. So doing a lot of the counseling around, helping someone to process the trauma, be it if it was their relationship or if they're a young kid that's been exposed to violence in the home. So we work with toddlers all the way up to adults. We also have group support. So we have group sessions for adults, teens, and tots where they can come together and support each other around their unique experiences. We also have legal advocates that are placed at courthouses around the Chicagoland area. Because if you can imagine, just for anyone, legalese is its own language. What are y'all talking about? What do you need me to do? So trying to understand the paperwork, the evidence, what a judge is asking you for, what the process is, that can be really confusing and daunting. So our legal advocates are there to answer questions as well as helping folks to understand this is the proper way to get an order of protection. This is, what your rights are under the law. This is what you have access to. These are some of the resources that you can utilize in the courthouse, that kind of thing. Additionally, Chicago has a standalone domestic violence courthouse. A lot of folks don't know that. There's a huge court building that's just for domestic violence cases downtown. Again, that's one of those things that to me is concerning and says a lot about our city as well as just the issue at large of intimate partner violence. But I'll put a pin in that and come back to that later. We also have a training and education department, so they work with police departments, fire departments, hospitals, colleges, universities, around creating victim-centered policies and programs. But more so, it's important that we strengthen our referral source with them. Those are institutions and spaces that have a higher likelihood of encountering folks that have experienced or will experience dating violence or domestic violence. So we just want to make it easy for them to know us, so send them on over if they need us, kind of thing. We do work with folks that cause harm. So we have a PAPE program that stands for Partner Abuse Intervention Program. And I actually just did a training with the supervisor for that department in relation to the commonalities between both of our programs. So if you're interested in that, I can send you that video if you want to see it. But it's actually kind of funny, the similarities between things that their clients say and our students say, oh yeah, they've also said that in our classroom. So just talking about how we deal with clients that are resistant to change. So for them, it's the perpetrators, and for us, it's students that have to be in our presentation. So how do we deal with that and make the most out of it? And so on that end, in prevention, we are in middle school and high school classrooms around the west side of Chicago, as well as the surrounding western burbs. We serve 6th through 12th grade, but we are working on a lower school curriculum, so we will serve K through 12 eventually. We've been piloting our kindergarten lesson for maybe the last 2 to 3 years now, and it's so different, working with 3 and 4-year-olds versus 7th graders. 7th graders are kind of surly. Don't know if y'all know that. But the kindergartners, they're great because you just walk into their classroom and they're like, "We love your hair." And I'm like, "Can I live here? Y'all are my babies. This is it. This is all I want to do." So we're really excited about that and the future of that program. But our program aligns with the social emotional learning standards for the state of Illinois. So while a lot of parents sometimes get worried or concerned that we're going to talk about stuff that's not age appropriate, we're really just helping students to practice social emotional learning skills. We just use relationships and friendships as the umbrella to like talk about the stuff, but we're helping them to navigate working through conflict or understanding the consequences of their emotions on other people, or being able to identify their support networks, all that good stuff. Okay, and usually by saying that we align with the social emotional learning standards, that allows for our foot in the door in schools, because that's an annual requirement that they have to make anyway. So for tonight's conversation, we are going to talk about the foundational elements of domestic violence, because you can find them in dating violent relationships as well. We're going to talk about how to recognize the signs, what are the unique barriers to services or to fleeing that young people have that adults probably don't have, and then understanding the opportunities for intervention, what those strategies look like, so on and so forth. So just out of my curiosity for the room, raise your hand if you're parents. Okay. All right, that helps me out. Raise your hand if you are a young person. Parents, you should have raised your hands too. Like, duh. Okay, cool. Okay. So it's like a 50-50 split. Okay, so my presentation style is pretty interactive. That typically comes from having to make sure that our students are paying attention. Also, I just feel like there's a lot of experience and knowledge in the room. I may be the expert per se, but there's a lot of experience in the room and we can learn from each other. So there are going to be some moments where we can share out, or I'm going to ask for your opinion or ask you to answer things. This is one of those moments. So my question to you is, can you name a celebrity or fictional couple that you admired when you were a young person? So preteen, teen, tween. I'll give you a second to think about it. So I'll share mine, and then if something comes to you, you can share yours. So when I was younger, the first one that kind of comes to mind for me, and this question is totally going to date you, just throwing that out there. So for me, when I was younger, I used to watch, I remember going from like Saturday morning cartoons to like, I want to watch something else. I feel like mature. I don't want to watch these cartoons. And so I was watching Saved by the Bell. That's what I was watching. And for those that don't know, Saved by the Bell was like a scripted teen show that came on Saturday mornings. It's centered on the main character. His name was Zach Morris. He was kind of like the school's popular guy. He was the type of person where he never wanted to do work, was always trying to get out of like doing work, doing homework, doing projects, whatever. If he could put it on someone else, if he could copy a test, copy a paper, he would. Was always a slickster, always willing, like looking for ways to like make money or like have fun, go surfing, that kind of thing. It was set in California, by the way. But he had a core group of friends where they were all like, one was like the fashion one, like the fashionista. His girlfriend was the head cheerleader, Kelly Kapowski. He was also friends with like the school jock. And somehow like the school nerd also like folded into the mix. So like it was a diverse array. It was like it was a diverse array of friends. He was also friends with the school feminist, now that I think about it, and like the really political one. But they would go on adventures together, like they would have schemes to make money, or there were a couple episodes where they were like rock stars and had their own like rock band. But as a kid, I was like, this is it. That's going to be high school for me. I know it. I'm going to be just like Zach Morris. I'm going to be super popular. I'm going to date someone and we're going to be high school sweethearts for like 4 years. The show actually like followed them from high school to college, and I think they even like got married afterward. But I was like, that's going to be my life. I'm going to have lunch on the beach. Y'all, I grew up in Chicago, born and raised. Was not going to happen, especially today. But I was just like, no, that's it. I'm going to wear crop tops and like be head cheerleader. And that created for me in my mind an expectation of what high school and adolescence and dating was going to be like. So that's the first one that pops in my brain. I'll stop talking. What pops into yours? What celebrity couples or fictional couples from TV shows or movies were popular for you when you were younger? I always get Twilight. Someone always names them. Yeah.
I'm gonna date myself. I'm gonna say Claire
I always get the Huxtables. Yep. Someone always names that.
You're like, yeah, I want to get married and have not all the kids.
Yeah.
But, if you would be a little happy, be happy like that.
Yeah. Once I realized like how much work went into being a doctor or a lawyer, I was like, no, I'm good. That's fine. But yeah, awesome example. Thank you. Anyone else? I always get Justin Bieber and Selena Gomez, which I find really interesting because like they haven't been a couple for like 10 plus years, right? But the tabloids still benefit from like talking about them today, even though he is married with a child and like she's now engaged. So I find it really interesting, like even how the tabloids play into the clickbait of like the drama around a relationship. But yeah. Who else do I usually get? Sometimes I'll get Corey and Topanga from Boy Meets World. So that's also like part of my generation. I'm like, yep, I know that. I just did this a couple of weeks ago. I'm trying to think what they put in the chat because I did this virtually. Folks put in, sometimes I get the Obamas, never from kids. Kids never mention the Obamas. Kids also never mention Jay-Z and Beyonce, but like adults do. I'm so glad that the Kardashians have like the fanfare around them has died down a little bit, because in the classroom I would get them all the time and I'm like, okay, let's have this conversation. Yes, let's talk about the Kardashians. But how many of you watched the Grammys, saw things like about the Grammys over the last couple of weeks? Yeah. Did we see Kanye on the red carpet? Yeah, let's talk about Kanye on the red carpet for a second. So Kanye, for us, has served as, and this is horrible to say, but has served as an excellent, like, real-time example of what abuse can look like. When he was going through his divorce with Kim, it was an example of digital and emotional abuse. And asking students, like, hey, so, like, what do you think about it? What do you see? And they're just like, he's funny. He's so crazy. Like, he just says things. And it's like, yeah, but that's actually abusive. And, like, walking them through, like, what his words incite, what they mean. Because there was a point there where he was asking folks to, like, be physically aggressive toward Pete Davidson, who was dating Kim at the time. Right? And not just thinking of it as a joke, but like, because I think he was calling him like Stinky Pete or something. I forgot what it was. It was some weird nickname. But pushing students to think past like the joke part of it, like, no, he's serious. And this is actually what abuse looks like, even in the absence of physical violence. Like, we don't know what's happening in that household. We can't see that. But what we are seeing, yep, this is still controlling behavior. It's still a power play. Like, it's not okay. Right? And so pointing that out is really, really important. What happened on the red carpet on Sunday, so for those that may not know, I think he's remarried. The wife that he has now, they were on the red carpet together. She had on a fur coat, took the fur coat off. Essentially, she was naked on the carpet. Like, you could see everything. And he's, standing next to her, cool, calm, collected, like just holding her hand, posing for pictures. Now, the reason why I say this is unhealthy, and I think it's toxic. I don't necessarily want to say that display in and of itself is abusive, but Kanye has a habit of objectifying women that he's with and controlling their image. So he's done it to Amber Rose. That was kind of like the first one that we've seen. He did it to Kim Kardashian, and he's doing it with this wife as well. Sorry, I just don't remember her name. With Kim, on the reality show, there are a couple of scenes where it's demonstrated. I believe the very first one that I saw was when they were dating and he cleared out her closet. He threw everything away and it was just like, no, you need to dress better. I'm going to dress you. And then like it was the clothes that he felt were appropriate that he put into her closet, and like that was how she would dress. So she stopped wearing colors, if you realize that. She wasn't wearing like pinks and yellows and oranges. She was wearing like neutrals. And I think she has since like stayed with that color tone. She typically only wears neutrals now. But that was something that she got from him. And so there's a couple of scenes from the reality show where you can see that. There's also one that I watched recently because someone was making the connection to the Grammy red carpet and what they've seen and his behavior with Kim, where he's having a conversation with her about like his newfound faith and Christianity, and was talking about how he felt uncomfortable with how she was dressing, and her pushback was, but you dressed me like this. You made me like this. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you told me what to wear. And I just thought that was a really interesting like conversation for them to have. So yeah, sometimes you'll see like patterns in multiple relationships for people. Any others for this? Any other examples? I'm trying to think of others that come up. Any other? There's always like Jennifer Aniston, not Ben Affleck, Brad Pitt, or Brad Pitt and Angelina. Like people always name them as well. Which again is very similar to me to like the Justin and Selena, because that seems to always be a relationship that even like the tabloids are like, oh, they were in the same place. Keep your eyes on them, like that type of clickbait thing. Trying to really drum up the drama there. So I asked this question in classrooms with young people, and that's more so because I need to know who they're looking to, who's influential, where they're getting their information. So a lot of dating, is trial and error. And in having conversations with young people, I've had a student say like, well, I don't see it in my household. No one's talked to me about it. And I kind of need to see what it looks like so that I can do it too. Specifically, they were talking about consent. They're like, people don't do consent. That's not a real thing. Like, you're telling me to do it, but I've never seen it on a TV show. I've never seen it in a movie. People don't have that conversation. And so that's what made me a little bit more sensitive about media and what's consumed and what's out there for folks. But a lot of the answers we get are like social media influencers or YouTubers. And I'm just like, who? I'm like Googling, like, who is that? Why are they important? So I don't know most of the names that kiddos name for us, but step back. I did have a student in middle school that like said a couple names and like his friends laughed. And when I Googled it, they were porn stars. And I was like, oh, that's not funny. But also the fact that you know their names, that says a lot, right? So I say that to say when we don't have conversations, when we're not educating or navigating or allowing students the space, young people, the space to, ask questions or learn information or process things, especially about like relationships, then they're going to find a filler. They're going to find something else to lean into to see what is normal, what they should be doing, what it looks like. And so a lot of times it's, the fictional couple or, social media or what have you. For adults, I like to ask this question because it also gives me a sense of who's in the room as well as what expectations you're holding for young people in your lives. I say that because sometimes we're holding on to our own experiences or the things that got us through our adolescence as the marks for, how the young people in our lives should also act or what they're also leaning into, meaning sometimes we believe that relationships should run hot and cold. That's just what teens do. Right? They break up, they make up, they're just hormonal. They don't know what they want. Like, they're going to mess up. They're going to get back together. That's what happens. No, when you have that expectation, you're actually creating space for abuse to happen because you're not checking in and you're just writing it off as like, oh, that's just what teens do. That's hormones. And that's not fair. That's also not true, right? The breakup, makeup thing, on and off, that's actually unhealthy. So if you're seeing that happen, tap into that. Have a conversation around that. Like, what's going on here? I remember a student explained that to me as, this was a few years ago. I don't know if folks still say this, but she was just like, well, that's my forever. My first love is my forever. I'm always going to go back to them because they're my forever. And that was like the nickname she had for that person. It wasn't just one student. It was a couple schools where I heard that. Your forever is just always going to have tabs on you. They're always going to have their hooks on you. Because, like, how can you break that? That's your first love. That's your forever. But to think about, like, your 14-year-old self still going back to, or going back to your 14-year-old love, like on and off throughout high school or college, like, no, you should probably let that go, right? Like you've done some maturing, you've done some learning and growing. You're not the same person, and they're not as well, right? So having conversations around what's okay, setting boundaries, what healthy should look like, people having seasons in your life, they don't have to, you don't have to have friendships or relationships that last a long time. Like, it's okay to understand that when something is over and what that looks like when something is over is actually really important. So that's a lot of what we do in the classroom. I'm actually excited that you guys are here tonight because you're helping us in our work. I know from this point forward, you'll go forward and have these conversations and create safe spaces where your young people can talk about these things, and you're going to model healthy behaviors, and it's going to be great. Just so that you know, in retrospect, Zach Morris was trash. He was a horrible character. For me, it created the expectation that, like, oh, your boyfriend can cheat on you and that's fine. He cheated on his girlfriend all the time. He actually had a few episodes where he, like, flirted with all of his friends. So it was like, even within the friend group, like, you were cheating on your girlfriend, like, so weird, so disrespectful. And if you're interested, there's a Facebook show that's called Zach Morris's Trash. So if you go on Facebook and, like, type that in, it breaks down every episode and it's like, this is why he was trashing this one. So if you have time and nothing better to do, you could check that show out. All right. So we're going to play a quick game I call Myth or Reality. It's very similar to True or False. I'm going to read a statement, and you just need to raise your hand when you think it is myth or reality. So I'll say, like, myth. You can raise your hand. Reality, raise your hand. If you think what I'm reading is false, there's no truth to it whatsoever, then that would be myth. If you think there's truth to what I'm saying, then you would raise your hand for reality. If you have questions, just let me know. So jealousy is normal and can be a part of any relationship. Do we think this is a myth? Do we think it's reality? Cool. Don't be shy. We're all friends here. So it is reality. The way that we tend to explain it is jealousy is just a natural, normal human emotion. Just like sadness or envy or anger. A lot of students, there's connotation around those strong emotions because I think people feel guilty or feel like they're negative emotions, so I shouldn't feel those things. I should be happy all the time. That's not our life. Happy all the time just doesn't happen, right? But for jealousy, that can occur in a relationship, and what's important is that you're able to have the conversation with your person around that you can talk to them about what you're feeling, and that's the hard part. So I'm actually really upfront with students about, when we talk about healthy, it feels like it's a simple Sesame Street, like pie in the sky thing to do. I'm just going to be honest all the time, and the sun is going to shine, and it's going to be great, and these healthy relationships are just going to happen. And it's like, no, it's difficult. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to own up to mistakes. You have to take accountability. You have to change behavior. You have to apologize, right? There's a lot that goes into being healthy. It's not just like super easy. And it's something you have to practice. It's a muscle. So for this one, yes, someone can be jealous, but when they start using that jealousy as an excuse to be controlling or possessive, that's when it's unhealthy and or abusive, depending on what comes from that. But having the conversation is where it should start. So I have a lot of students that say, what did they ask me once? Lately, a lot of students have taken to being proud of some of the controlling behaviors that they have, even in middle school spaces. They're like, I go through my boyfriend's phone, so what? Like, I don't want him cheating on me. And so I remember a student asked me, like, do you go through your husband's phone? I said, no. And she was like, oh, you goofy. He's cheating on you right now. Ma'am, it is 10:38 a.m. I hope he is at work. I hope he is not cheating on me. Like, what? And so having conversations around, can you actually control if someone is cheating on you? No, you cannot. And what that looks like, what it looks like when you realistically give autonomy and space and privacy that is rightfully owed to your partner when you give that to them, and giving them also the responsibility over how they respect the relationship or how they utilize those things. If they're using their privacy to talk to other people, flirt, cheat on you, that's not a reflection on you, that's a reflection on them. Why try to keep someone that doesn't want to be kept? They're showing you they don't want to be here, right? They keep trying to step out on you, or they're cheating on you, or whatever. And so then that becomes a conversation around boundaries, right? What are the boundaries that you have for yourself? So we try to have those conversations in the classroom, centering a lot more on the experience of how young people want to date and what that looks like for themselves, okay? Physical abuse is worse than emotional abuse. Myth? Okay. Reality? Awesome. Cool, so it's a myth. This one came up for us because there's an activity that we do, and you all are actually going to do it as well in a few slides, where there's a spectrum. We outline or we give a few behaviors that could exist within a relationship or that could exist within an abusive relationship, and we ask students, hey, put this on a spectrum from healthy to unhealthy to abusive. The things that aligned more with emotional abuse, students always put that closer to the unhealthy, sometimes even saying like, it's not that bad. It's common, or it's a thing that's like, whatever, shouldn't happen, but like I could ignore my partner. The physical abusive stuff was always, that's abuse. No, that shouldn't happen, right? it brought to light for us that there's a dichotomy that's happening in people's heads. Like if it's physical abuse, that's no, that's bad. Anything that's not that isn't that bad. Like, okay, like maybe it's commonplace. That doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's healthy. So it pushed us to start having conversations and talking points related to stop thinking about it in terms of one is worse than the other, or this is survivable, or this one isn't that bad, or at least it's not a black eye. Like, that's not how we think about abuse. Abuse shouldn't be happening, period. And in the absence of physical abuse, it could still be an unhealthy relationship. It could still be a violent relationship because maybe there's emotional or digital or financial abuse, right? There are other forms of it. So now we do our best to actually spend time talking about the different forms of abuse, what their impacts could be, and the signs around that. So it's not that one is worse than the other, because there's consequences for both. Just because you don't see the consequence or the impact of the emotional abuse doesn't necessarily mean that it's not bad, right? So yeah, that became the conversation. Dating violence only occurs between boys and girls. Myth? Oh, y'all got it. I don't like every. Sorry, let me go back. Yeah, so it's a myth. For this one, it was more so on us. We realized that we were speaking in a very heteronormative way in the classroom, and we were saving the LGBTQ plus stuff until it was requested by a school, right? Like, oh, you have a group, you want us to talk to them? Cool, we'll come in and do that. That's when we'll bring these stats. That's when we'll talk about this or give these examples of emotional abuse. And so it really brought to light that we were doing a disservice to students. We weren't creating global citizens. We weren't creating peers that could surveil for all the relationships, right? So we really want to make sure that young people, one, are aware and just like educated, but two, creating that empathy where they're looking outside themselves and really thinking of themselves as citizens that are supposed to keep watch of like everybody. Like your safety is my safety, right? And so if we were withholding information, they weren't able to do that properly. So what we do know is that dating violence occurs everywhere, unfortunately. Domestic violence and dating violence are equal opportunity offenders. That's how I describe them. It doesn't matter, if you have a college degree, it doesn't matter what type of job you have, what type of community you live in, it's there. You may not see it, you may not be experiencing it directly, but it's there. It's next door to you. It's the floor below you. It's there. Unfortunately, we do know that the obstacles are different for LGBTQ plus youth in the terms of fewer resources, as well as the ability to access those resources, as well as thinking through if a student isn't out yet and maybe their partner is the only one that knows, then their partner can use that to, blackmail them or do the emotional abusive thing of, I'm going to out you if you try to break up with me. I'm going to tell your mom, or I'm going to send this picture of us kissing to your dad, or, what have you, right? So explaining that to all the students that we see, I feel like is really helpful in terms of getting them to think through just how insidious abuse can be and how it could look in different forms and phases. Okay. And last one, alcohol and drugs cause teen dating violence and sexual assault. Myth. Reality. All right, so it's actual myth. The way that we explain it is violence is a behavior. It's a learned behavior. Behavior is changeable, right? You can decide to do other things, but the drugs and alcohols don't cause the initial thought of, oh, let me do this thing. That already existed. The value system that you have around violence existed before you partook in drugs or alcohol. It can definitely exacerbate it. Don't get that confused. It can make the situation worse if it is introduced, but it's never usually the cause or the seed that causes the violence to happen, if it makes sense. Yeah, this usually comes up in conversations around consent. And for most students, lovingly, they haven't, had alcohol before, or not to the point where they've gotten drunk. And so a lot of them believe what they see in movies where they're like, if I have a sip of beer, then I'm just going to wake up and I would have blacked out, and I wake up and I don't know what happened. And so I don't know. And we have to usually explain that that's not necessarily how alcohol or drugs work, right? And so having that conversation with them is important too. All right. So I've talked a lot about, I've mentioned a little bit about power and control. I've talked about, dating violence. So what is it? When I talk about dating violence, I'm defining it as a set of behaviors, a pattern of behaviors around power and control that someone exhibits in a relationship. So this is what we call our power and control wheel. This one is actually the one that we fit for youth relationships. So you'll see power and control is in the center because that's what the person that's causing harm is trying to obtain. And so the way that you read this is that the black outer edge that says violence, that's representative of physical or sexual violence. So that's more of an extreme. That's not necessarily the stuff that happens every day. But the green and yellow spokes around the center, that's the stuff that happens every day. That's more of the emotional abusive stuff. So for example, using social status, I'm a football player. Do you know how many girls are trying to talk to me? Or I'm a junior. I could be talking to anybody right now. You need to act right. I could replace you. Like using that power differential. Because sometimes I think folks tend to think that all young people are on the same plane for power. Like they're equals. They should be equals. But there are some things that, give social capital and give someone more power than maybe someone that they're dating or someone that they have a crush on. We have a partnership with the OPRF Hockey Club. And so I even asked them once when doing a presentation, like, hey, what does power look like for y'all? And for them, it looked like the player that had more seniority, the player that had more time on the ice, the player that is really, really good, right? So you would think, even on the same team, we're all playing together. We all have the same amount of strategy. We all have the same mission. Even for them, power looks different. And so they were experiencing it differently. So it's something to keep in mind. Someone that's using, that's minimizing, denying, and blaming would say like, oh, you just always push my buttons, or I'm so stressed out. I'm applying to all these colleges, and you just, like if you would just act right, then I wouldn't have to do this. So never taking full accountability. If I can't have you, no one can. So using threats, that's actually a very common one that some students have said that they've heard. And I usually name for them, if you hear that, tell a trusted adult. And you can also let that trusted adult know, like, I don't need you to do anything right now. It just sounded really weird. I'm at a space in my relationship where I'm thinking of possibly ending the relationship. And this one comment was just like really weird. So I'm letting you know because I may need your help in the future, right? So you're just getting them ready just in case, okay? And then the last one, isolation. So for adults, we may think of isolation in terms of like moving them to another state, not letting them have access to money, or you're a stay-at-home spouse now, so, you stay here, I run the money or whatever, the finances. But it could also look like social isolation. So don't talk to your parents about us. They just want us to break up. Your mom doesn't like me. Or whenever you mention your friends always have an opinion. We always end up fighting. Your friends are stupid. They're just jealous. I had a guy that say, he said, I don't like my girl's friends because they're all thoughts. She don't need to be hanging out with them anyway, because like she's too good for them, right? So when I asked more questions, it actually came from a space of safety, and he was just like, well, I don't feel like she's being safe when she hangs out with them because they always do like some reckless things, blah blah blah. And so if I was judgmental, I would have been like, no, you can't talk like that. But it sounded initially like he was being harmful until I asked him. I was like, well, she's her own person. She can decide who she wants to hang out with. He's like, I know, I just don't like it. So like, I'm glad I got him to that space. But sometimes the social isolation can sound like this. And it works because they're trying to create a wedge in the other influential voices for that person that they're dating, because they want to be the most influential voice. So when we talk about the different forms of abuse with young people, I will always point out for them that emotional abuse fits into that, like gaslighting. Gaslighting is a term that most students know now when we go into the classroom, which is really cool. So I've been doing this work for about 8 years with Sarah Zinn. When I initially started, kids didn't know what gaslighting was. They were like, what is that? That's weird. You mean like a stove? Like, what is that? But now they know what it is and they can define it. And I think that's really cool. I think that speaks a lot to how commonplace we're getting in having these conversations. We're trying to make them less taboo. They're becoming more normal. I also credit movements like, #MeToo for allowing people to have the space to have these conversations. and learn the language and the terminology. So I think that's really cool. So this is actually one of the graphics that we use in the classroom. So when we talk about types of abuse, we only focus on these 4. You'll notice financial abuse isn't on here, and that's just because typically, like, most young people won't be impacted by that, or that's not really a form of abuse that is really common. I'll define it for them if they ask, but it's not one that we focus on. But for emotional, we explain it as harm to one's self-worth, their well-being, how they think about themselves, how gaslighting fits into that, and how when it comes to the different forms of abuse, a lot of folks think all I have to do is look out for the hands. When they start putting their hands on me, that's when it's time to go. And I say, no, this happens first. This is the one that's hard to watch out for. It's the emotional abuse that you have to look out for. And that one is hard because that one is covert. That one's the one that feels like, oh, I'm just being too sensitive, or I didn't understand the joke, or they were just joking. Why am I so upset about it? Or, oh, I do need to do better. I know they're stressed out. Why did I just pick that fight? Or why did I just da-da-da-da? I know they don't like da-da-da-da. Why did I just do that, right? And it works because it gets you to start second guessing yourself, right? Digital abuse is, we liken it to cyberbullying just because that provides a nice platform for understanding. But digital abuse is anything using technology to harass, intimidate, bully, or stalk someone. So examples being, I had a student a couple years ago that said, yeah, my girlfriend called me out of the blue one day and was just like, why are you at this street in this cross street? And he was like, how do you know where I am? And she was like, no, answer me. What's her name? Why are you at her house? That's not where you live. You're never there. Why are you there? Who are you seeing? Who are you cheating on me with? And he was like, well, I'm at my grandmother's house. It's her birthday. We're having dinner here. How do you know where I am? And she was like, well, I put a thing on your phone. And he was like, what, you've been tracking me? And she was like, yeah, I track your location just to make sure you are where you say you are. So he broke up with her. He was like, I couldn't trust her after that. Like, that was wild. She went into my phone to put something I didn't know was there and was tracking me. And I was like, sorry you had that experience. He was like, yeah, but I broke up with her, right? So that would be what we consider stalking. Someone using the Snap Map on Snapchat to, like, keep track of their person's location. We always tell students you should turn that off. Like, unless your parents are using it or your parents know about the function and are okay with, like, your location being seen, even though I'm pretty sure most parents aren't, turn it off because you can turn that off. Also, things like your partner constantly going through your phone, even if you give them permission, that's still digital abuse. Your partner making you feel like you always have to be accessible and answer text messages right away, that's digital abuse, because that's that intimidation factor, like, oh, something's going to happen if I don't respond. Your partner threatening to expose you, so threatening to blackmail you, that actually dovetails into sexual abuse. So forcing someone to do something with their body sexually that they don't want to do, that could include receiving nudes. So if someone is sending you nudes that you didn't ask for, or explicit material, pornography that you didn't ask for, that's actually sexual harassment. Your partner refusing to practice safe sex, that is sexual abuse. So you try to have the conversation with them about how you want to experience the intimacy in the relationship, and if they're like, no, I don't wear condoms, or I don't do that, or stealthing was a big thing a few years ago, like people talking about stealthing. And for those that don't know, stealthing is when you're having sex with someone and in the midst of it, they remove the condom and they don't tell you. That's stealthing. That is illegal. Not a lot of students were aware of that, or in the classrooms that we were in talk about that, but it came to light, I think, because of a couple of instances, I think in like California or somewhere. So there are laws against it. We also talk about revenge porn. So that is when, like, a breakup happens and one of the exes non-consensually posts the nude of the person that they just broke up with, right? Because you're trying to get revenge on that person. And you can send it in a group chat. You can post it on, Snapchat. I was about to say Facebook, but kids don't use Facebook. Totally dating myself there. Kids do not use Facebook. But it's the publishing of it, and part of that is also emotional because you're purposely trying to embarrass that person. You're trying to humiliate that person, and you want other people to look down on that person. And so in Illinois, there are laws against it. So I tell students about that because it is very often, even in middle school, so like, oh yeah, I've like gotten a nude from like someone in my class, or like it's gone around. When I talk about allyship, I'll always ask them or tell them, if you get one of those messages, it can even be just a screenshot of someone's conversation that you weren't originally in that's going around, or someone's nude, stop it with you. You don't need to forward it to other people. You don't need to show it to other people. Delete it off your phone. Stop the chain. Like that's helpful. It feels small, but it's helpful. So that's, a really small action that like allyship could look like. And then lastly, physical abuse, so harm done to the physical body or the threat of harm done to the body. And that could even be someone throwing objects at you. Even though they miss you, that's still physically abusive. Any questions about this? No? Okay. Digital abuse, we started highlighting it a little bit more like in the COVID times when everyone was at home, just because I think there was a thought that in the absence of physical school happening and people not being in the same classroom, they thought teen dating violence wasn't happening. But it's like, no, it is, right? So it's still, threatening text messages or yelling over FaceTime, all that kind of stuff. The one thing I do want to point out on this slide, so when it comes to image-based abuse or revenge porn, if someone, like a celebrity, if their nudes come out, the way that you react to them says a lot to a young person about how you'll react in their situation. It's actually very commonplace that it happens. So if you say things like, why did they take those pictures in the first place? Or she knew she leaked them, she didn't get hacked. Or of course they got hacked, they're a celebrity, of course their stuff is gonna get out. What did they expect? That's saying a lot, that's modeling a lot for your attitude to that young person, and actually shows them that you're probably not a safe person to talk to if that's how you're receiving that situation. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. Cool. Okay, this is kind of like the meat of it. This is probably what you want to know. So warning signs and red flags for someone that may be experiencing abuse. So if they suddenly lose interest in things that are really important to them, so let's say they used to swim, in middle school, they were really interested in it. They were, on the swim team, winning all the medals, and then suddenly, they stopped doing it. Could be because something, it could be because there's an unhealthy or abusive relationship, or it could also be an unhealthy friendship, or maybe something's happening with the coach, or maybe they're being bullied with the team. I say all that to say that's worth a conversation, like following up with them, like what happened? What's going on? Same thing could apply for if someone is suddenly like failing classes, skipping school, or just like acting out, being antisocial in a way that they don't usually do. Those are red flags. Someone that's receiving excessive text messages from a partner or a toxic friend. I know we're talking about romantic relationships, but this could also apply to like friendships as well. Spending less time with family and friends, so maybe they're like self-isolating, getting worried about how their partner or a friend will react to something, or like always walking on eggshells around that person, like their demeanor feels different, they don't feel calm anymore, feeling pressure to do things a certain way, and then making excuses for their dating partner's behaviors. Additionally, warning signs or red flags for someone that could be perpetrating harm. So if they're constantly checking cell phones, emails, social media without permission or even with permission, that's a red flag. Why are you always why are you always going through their stuff? Why are you always monitoring? Like what's going on with that? Extreme jealousy, possessiveness, insecurity, controlling behaviors, right? Constantly belittling or putting down the person that they're dating or just like the people around them. Explosive temper, isolation from family and friends, making false accusations, constant mood swings, physically inflicting pain on themselves, other people, or small animals, telling someone what they can and can't do, repeatedly pressuring someone into having sex or drinking or skipping school or vaping, just that pressure. Those are also red flags, right? So sometimes we're in classroom spaces where we don't know who's in front, not sometimes, most of the time we're in classroom spaces where we don't know who's in front of us. So we present in a fashion where we do want to provide information for folks that could be experiencing dating violence, but we also want to talk to those that could be causing harm as well, right? And so for us, it's important to also point out that we're speaking to the behavior, not the person. The person, I feel like it's really easy for folks to demonize and vilify the person. Like, how could someone do? They have to be evil. They have to be crazy to do that. It's a lot of othering that can happen, but that's really harmful, especially in like middle school and high school classrooms. Because it's changeable, it's behavior. We just ask that, if they recognize those behaviors in themselves, reach out to a teacher. Like your school has a social worker, right? And if they want to work with us, sure. Like we do independent counseling. So we would just do one-on-one sessions with young people, and we've done it before. But it's still something that takes accountability on their end to get the help for that change. Okay. Some effects of abuse could be depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, engaging in unhealthy behaviors such as, drinking, drugs, alcohol, exhibiting antisocial behavior. So unfortunately, we know that teen girls are 6 times more likely to become pregnant or to contract an STI or an STD if they were abused previously. And youth victims who were victimized in high school have a higher likelihood of re-victimization in college. So sad, but, hopefully there's spaces and resources for folks if that is their experience, if they've gone through something. That is why it's important to talk about it and letting them know what their options are so so it doesn't fester and so that they're not holding on to that. Okay, so this is our spectrum activity. Because y'all have been too quiet. So now I need you to talk again. And so this activity is what I mentioned earlier. So I'm asking you to categorize what I'm reading to you as either healthy, unhealthy, or abusive. So for healthy, we're defining it as both partners have equal power and control. If it feels like it's fair, it's equal. They're talking to each other about it. They're making mutual decisions together. Cool, we can say it's healthy. If it feels like there's an imbalance and one person is really like pushing on the boundaries of another or ignoring the boundaries of the other, but maybe there's a clarifying conversation that could be had and an apology could fix it, okay, then it's unhealthy. But then abusive, we're defining that as one partner has all the power and control. If it feels like it's repetitive, so a situation that maybe has come up more than once, and if it feels like it's unsafe, like that's not a safe situation, then it's probably abusive, okay? So first one, your partner demands to know your passwords and is always looking through your phone. Is this healthy, unhealthy, or abusive? So if you think it's healthy, raise your hand. If you think it's unhealthy, if you think it's abusive. Okay, dang, I taught y'all well. Look, I couldn't trick you. Yes, does anyone want to say why they thought it was abusive? I mean, you're all right.
Yeah.
It was the always? Yeah. So for this one, most students get, some students get it. Most students will start with, it's unhealthy. And I think it's because this is actually a very common practice, not just in romantic relationships, but friendships as well. They'll go through each other's phones. And most of the time it's not malicious intent, it's just curiosity. Like who are you talking to? Especially in relationships, it's who are you talking to? Are you cheating on me kind of thing? And for that, I literally just told the class the other day, like, you may be curious, but that doesn't mean that you're deserved of an answer. Like, it doesn't mean that you get that answer. Unfortunately, we live in a time where you could Google all the things, like all the questions, to get the answers that you want. But sometimes you just have to have the curiosity. Sometimes you just get to sit in the question of, who are they talking to? What are they doing on their phone? Right? Just because you're dating someone doesn't mean that you get 24/7, just 100% access to them and all their things. For phones, we explain that as, you have the right to privacy. You are your own person. And so you may have conversations or information on your phone that you want to keep private. You don't want other people to see. And it has nothing to do with cheating. I usually give the example of, so my husband and I, we've been together for like 12 years now. And so our text thread goes back. But in that time, I'm sure we've shared with each other like our social security numbers or like other sensitive information. And I don't want just anyone to be able to go through it. I'm sure we've also have probably had like arguments or made resolution like in text message. And I don't want someone to like look at that either. You may have group chats where your friends have shared stuff that they think is private and confidential. And now, like, if your partner's going through it, now they know that's not fair to them either, right? So it's important to think about your phone, not just as like, as adults, like we kind of just think of it as a tool of utility. And ease and convenience, but it's also an extension of our worlds. Like it's also just like a digital platform for these relationships that we have and these interactions, and it's okay to protect those with privacy. You don't have to give someone access to that. So I think saying that out loud sometimes is helpful for them. But yeah, y'all caught on to the keywords. Demands, so they're taking away choice, and always, so it's repetitive. So we know that this is abusive because of those reasons. Okay. If you have a disagreement, your partner uses the silent treatment and won't talk to you for days. Actually, this should say, for your first disagreement, your partner uses the silent treatment and won't talk to you for days. So do we think this is healthy? Unhealthy? Abusive? Okay. So it's unhealthy. And that I felt it was important to clarify, like if it's the first time you have the disagreement and like this is how your partner is responding to it, we can actually shift it. There are ways to shift it to the healthies. I usually note for students 2 things. So it's okay if you need to take a break in a conversation. I am that person where if I get upset, I can feel the fire in my belly starting to rise on up. And if it gets to right here, I'm about to start saying some stuff that's not nice and I can't back down. So I usually know my body cues. So we do talk to students about body cues. Like, what is your body trying to tell you? What do those signs mean? What can you do if those things come up for you? And taking a break in the conversation is one of those things, right? So if your hands are getting sweaty, if you're feeling yourself ball up your fist, if you are angry to the point where you're crying or about to cry, take a break. Like, you don't have to solve it. You don't have to, you don't have to try to solve it. You don't have to try to continue the conversation tonight. And the way that you communicate that is like, hey, this feels unproductive, or this isn't going anywhere. We've been talking in circles, and I'm just getting really frustrated. I can't think about this anymore. Let me sleep on it tonight, and we can talk about it, tomorrow afternoon. So you communicate the need, but you're also putting a time limit on it, right? If you don't put the time limit, then it's just going to linger and fester. So you want to come back to it, and you want to do it with calmer heads and calmer space. So that's how you do that. And most students are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I shouldn't just leave them on red. No, you shouldn't. That's rude. I did have someone tell me, she was like, well, when my boyfriend does the stuff that I don't want him to do, I block him on everything because he gonna learn I don't like that. And I was like, actually, the fact that he keeps doing the things that you don't like and you haven't learned that the punishment isn't working, that says a lot. Because what's actually happening is you're blocking him, you're giving him 2 free days to continue to do the thing that you don't like, because he knows eventually you're gonna unblock him. And then you'll be calmer and you'll get back together. So you're not changing the behavior. Your alleged punishment of him, trying to make him feel guilty, trying to make him feel like he's lost you, he knows that he hasn't. And you're trying to manipulate his behavior, and that doesn't work. And she was like, huh. I was like, no, that's just not the healthy way to deal with it. And I think a lot of people in general, I was going to say young people, but a lot of people in general try to do that. And usually for this one, I'll always own up to yep, I've done this recently. I was mad at someone. I felt like they wasted my time. I have 2 small kids at home. I'm always very tired. There's always work for me to do. And the fact that I set aside time for a person and then they no-showed, they flaked on me, I was mad, y'all. I was mad. So my text was like, oh, well, I hope, it was worth it. I hope you, had fun doing whatever you were doing. That was just passive aggressive. I shouldn't have said that. Right, and caught myself. That was the important part. I caught that what I was doing and had to correct it and say, you know what, look, I'm sorry. I'm just a little frustrated because I was really looking forward to seeing you. And, my time just feels very, very few and far these days. And so I'm just disappointed. And I would just like for you to acknowledge that, you messed up. And they're like, oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. That's all I was looking for, right? I didn't have to try to manipulate them or guilt them into it. So even for adults, we make mistakes. We have to own up to it. And so I make it a point to share that with students so that they know it's a work in progress. Last one, you share a screenshot in a group chat of sensitive information from your ex. Is this healthy? Unhealthy? Abusive? It's actually abusive. So this one's wrong. Y'all got it right. It's abusive. So it's abusive because you're trying to embarrass that person. You're trying to like make fun of that person. Usually, if you're sharing the information, some students will say like, "Oh, well, what if I'm just really worried? What if they shared something concerning?" That's different. And if you're really worried about them, you shouldn't share it in the group chat. You should share it with a trusted adult. Like if you're really trying to like create change and look for answers and resources, tell a trusted adult. Understandably, if you're like, "What do I do with this? They said this thing. What do I do?" I get it, but it shouldn't stay in the group chat. You have to tell an adult about what's happening. But yes, essentially, if you're trying to make other people like, look down at this person, then yeah, that's emotional abusive. Great job. I'm gonna pat myself on the back. I taught y'all well. Sometimes we get the question of why do they say this isn't a comprehensive list, but it could be conflicting emotions. So maybe there's fear that if they leave, maybe this is normal. Right? Maybe they grew up in a household where they've seen this, or in a family where they've seen this, and they're thinking that like, I too am deserving of this. Like this is par for the course. This is what happens. There could also be embarrassment, low self-esteem, or believing that this is love. This is how I show love, or I really love this person. I just mess up sometimes. Right? There could be the pressure from like cultural expectations or religious reasons. If they're parenting or co-parenting, that's a whole added like nuance, right? And then for safety, I shared that one because I was at a school where students said, well, in my neighborhood, there's a lot of gang violence. And so I actually feel safer with the person that I'm with because they'll protect me from all of that. Yeah, okay, sometimes they get angry, but like, I can navigate that. Like, that's fine. I can deal with that. I would rather have my general safety in my community be secured versus like not having them there. And that was real and that was valid. And so in that moment, I was just kind of like, yeah, where do we go from there? Right? I eventually, like we had more questions and more conversation. But I tapped into the school social worker to like let them know what the student said and to get them, more assistance. But yeah, like in that moment, I was just like, no, that's okay. That's true. Like I get it. Like I get why you would say that, right? Distrust of authority. So when someone is dismissive and says it's just puppy love, or there are a million fish in the sea, you'll get over it. It's not that big of a deal. There could be a distrust of police. So in our work, we also have to think through, if someone doesn't want to go to the police, like what else can they do? What else does safety look like for them, or what could be a part of that safety for them? There could also be reliance on a partner, so maybe lack of money, nowhere else to go. It's a whole host of reasons why someone stays, right? And so we have to be realistic within that. I'm a person that fully believes in context. I don't believe that most things happen in isolation or in a vacuum. You have to look at the whole context of like the person, the situation, what's going on for them, okay? I'm gonna pause here for a second. Any questions? I mean, there's a space for questions at the end, but like you can also just like, if you have questions, you can interject, it's fine. Okay, just letting you know. Sorry, I said that like almost done. It's like 10 minutes left. I'm like, if you want to ask a question. So sorry. So what makes this unique? Developmentally, we always have to remember where young people are. This is their first time experiencing most of this. And I say that to say, I remember reading a research paper that asked, when it comes to breakups, do young people or adults experience a worse heartbreak? And it was young people. And part of that was because this was their first time doing it. With adults, we can usually pick up the signs of this isn't working, this is a failed relationship, I don't want to be in this doesn't serve me anymore. And so you kind of mentally prepare, like you know what the signs are, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm ready to tap out of this, like this isn't great. For young people, they haven't done that yet, right? And they may be in a space where they're like, this is my first love. And we've been together, for 2 years, which is super rare for high schoolers. And we're going to go to the same college. And when we do that, we're going to graduate and get married. And so they're planning. And maybe they're not picking up on the signs of, no, this relationship is actually failing, or it needs to end, or the other person isn't happy, or whatever the other signs are, right? And part of that too, so it's experience, but also hormonally, they just feel things deeper and stronger as adults. I'll speak for myself. I'm numb. I've lived life. The hormones have subsided. They're gone, dead inside. But no, it's physiologically, like we just don't have the same amount of the hormone, so we just don't feel it as strongly as young people do. And then culturally, when we think about, again, this is a moment where I'm going to date myself. When I was younger, when I was your age, in middle school, I couldn't wait. In the spring, my friends and I would ask our parents if we could go to the mall. I would ask my dad, hey, can you drop me off at the mall? Me and my best friend. And he'd be like, sure. And so we would walk around the mall for like a couple of hours, and he'd be like, I'm going to pick you up from right here, be right here. And I would be there in the, after the 2 hours, and he'd pick me up, and it would be great. Like, I had independence in the mall for a second, and then, we would, talk on the phone about, oh my God, do you remember that cute boy that was at the ice cream place and blah, 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 right? And so I share that to say, when it comes to unsupervised time, it was different, right? You had to have a physical space and location to have unsupervised time. That was maybe the mall or the movies or school dance or whatever, right? Now, this is unsupervised time, right? So you're having group chats and DMs, and people can reach out to SZA or Drake or whoever that they want to on social media, right? So there's always that. Plus, cell phones allow for someone to be accessible 24/7. That wasn't a thing, when I was younger. I had to sneak out of bed to use the house phone that was like hanging up in the kitchen. And I would always say, like, if I hang up, don't call back. That means my mom woke up, right? So there was a time limit, but not these days. And now I have some young people, I'll say, like, hey, what time did you go to bed last night? And in middle school spaces, it's very performative because they like to be like, I didn't go to sleep. I stayed up all night. Like, I know you're lying, but still, the point being that they use their phones to, watch YouTube all night or Snapchat or TikTok or whatever. But also, when it comes to dating, they're using phones to cultivate trust and intimacy and relationship and humor and inside jokes, right? So it becomes a vehicle to continue to cultivate the relationship. So we also have to include it in our conversations when we're talking about healthy. Most folks adults don't usually create boundaries around digital access or how they want to be represented in digital spaces, but we need to start having those conversations with young people so that they can think about it for themselves, okay? So as I was talking, you're probably thinking to yourself, what did my parents talk to me about? As a young person, what did they tell me? This is a question that I also ask students. So we do have like 5 minutes together. I'm going to show you a quick, like a couple second clip. So this is a comedian. Her name is Takara Williams. She sets up this joke by saying she has a 19-year-old who's in college, and she's like, she is so smart. She's smarter than I am. Oh, I love her to death. She's so bright. I'm really trying to help her through school. I want her to have it easier than I had it. And so this is the conversation.
But she's so smart, she makes such good decisions at 19. She comes to me, she tells me 2 boys in her job like her. I'm gonna say this and go. And she goes, Ma, she called me Ma. I said, what? You know those 2 boys at my job that like me? I said, yeah, what happened? So Valentine's Day came and one of them gave me some flowers. I said, okay. So then the other one gonna call me talking about something, did you take the flowers from Brian? So I was like, yeah, I'll take the flowers from Brian. So he said, why would you take the flowers from Brian if you know I like you? So she said, because Brian liked me too. So then he said, well, what's that supposed to mean? She told him, well, maybe you should buy me some flowers then. So I said, what did he say? She said, he started cussing at me and calling me the B word. I said, and what you said? She said, I told him, hey, listen, I don't communicate that way. And I got finals tomorrow. I don't have time for this. So if you want to continue to communicate that way, I'm going to hang up the phone. You can't talk to me like that. I said, oh, and what happened? She said, he cussed at me again. I said, and what you did? She said, I blocked him. That's right. I said, okay, good job. But then I said, this is where I forgot. I said, well, what happened when you unblocked him? What was that conversation like? She said, well, I never unblocked him. I said, what you mean? She said, well, why would I unblock him? He was disrespectful. I said, so you never talked to him again? She said, no, I blocked him for like a reason, like why? And I looked at her and I said, teach me.
Okay. Reactions, thoughts? I shared that because I thought it was awesome that she could learn from her daughter. most of the time, like in this conversation, I've been like, yeah, with young people, you do this, and young people, you do that. But there's also so much that we can learn from young people, right? And so I just thought it was really cool that her, two things. Her daughter actually modeled and demonstrated two boundaries. One was, well, if you like me, buy me flowers. Like, duh. And two, you're not going to talk to me like that. So when we talk about boundaries, let me see if I can skip past this. When we talk about boundaries, we talk about it from a place of boundaries not being rules for other people. Like, you can't govern other people. You can't say, don't yell at me. You can't talk to me. But the way that her daughter did it was perfect. Like, that's not how I communicate. I actually have other things that I could be doing with my time. You know, do you want to change the way that you're communicating with me? No? Okay, then let me block you, right? The action, the onus is on you around that. So when we talk about healthy, boundaries is a part of that. Accountability is a part of that. I'll actually show you our 4 keys in a second, but I just wanted to show you the other half of the power and control wheel so that you see that there's a healthy. So it is important for us, yes, to talk about the abusive stuff, the unhealthy stuff, but also to affirm the healthy stuff that they are doing, because it's not all bad. Most students are just like perfect, excellent, like they got it. And so affirming that and uplifting that for them and highlighting that is really, really important. So for us, we focus on 4 keys, like this is the 4 foundational elements of a healthy relationship. So trust, support, communication, and boundaries. Trust is knowing you can count on that person. They wouldn't purposely try to hurt you, right? So mistakes happen. We're human. Sometimes someone forgets an anniversary or takes a joke a little too far. If you can forgive them, cool, because they didn't mean it on purpose. A lot of students will say for themselves, their green flag that they look for in relationships is someone that they can be open and honest with. So someone that they can talk to, but it's also important that they're willing to listen to them as well, even within conflict. That's really important. Support is usually something that I told them, you're already doing it. I'm sure you've already been doing it. Like, you have family and friends that you've been supporting already. Doing it for a romantic partner is something that, will be kind of simple for you, right? So if you're an athlete, how do you like to be supported? Oh, you want people to show up to the game? Cool, right? Like, that's what that would look like for you. Do that for them, right? So it's supporting someone on good and bad days. I recently had a student say that for her, support looks like someone that doesn't just like silver line things, that allow her to actually like sit in the heaviness of like whatever the situation is and like holding her hand through it. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's also really deep for like a high schooler, but like, yeah, that's awesome. And so, yeah, the fact that she thought through that for herself was really cool. And then boundaries are what's okay and what's not okay in your relationships. Really quickly, because I want to give you guys space for questions. What you tend to keep in mind for boundaries is that sometimes they come up after an offense has happened, but people can feel really guilty or really nervous to express it. But if the person is really your person, if the person is your friend, if they're your partner, they shouldn't get offended by you saying, hey, I actually didn't like that. Or can we do something differently? Or next time, X, Y, and Z. Right? They should be able to respect your boundaries because how you want to be treated is as an equal in the relationship. So you shouldn't feel like you have to walk on eggshells and compromise like your well-being and your treatment because you don't want them to get upset, right? So you should have safety in the relationship, and that includes emotional safety as well. So I'm going to pause there. Are there questions, comments, concerns, thoughts? No.